He flicked on the outdoor shower at their country home and forced her to wash in the freezing air to teach her a lesson. He watched her collapse as the ice-cold water stole the breath from her lungs. He believed no one would ever know the truth. He believed her suffering would end right here. But he could never have imagined that her father was a multi-billionaire with a secret network built to protect her at any cost. When her emergency beacon activated, the night exploded into a race of power, vengeance, and justice, poised to shatter his entire world. Night fell on the country house like a slab of black ice, silent and unforgiving. Frost glittered on the flagstones of the patio. Every gust of wind cut the air with a sharp whistle. Amelia Carter stood at the glass doors of the house, pulling her warm sweater tighter around herself. She was 7 months pregnant, exhausted and trembling, and it wasn't just from the cold. Something in her husband Ethan's gaze told her that tonight would become another memory she would desperately try to forget. But the darkness outside was already waiting specifically for her, as if it had been warned of her arrival. Ethan appeared behind her without warning. His reflection flickered in the glass, distorted and ghostly. He grabbed her arm with a force that made her inhale sharply. She could feel the pressure through the layers of wool, could feel the bruise that would bloom beneath her skin by morning. His voice, quiet and controlled, brushed against her ear. There was no warmth in it. There hadn't been for a long time. "Get outside," he said. "You need to learn how to behave." She whispered that the temperature was below freezing, that she was already shivering, that their baby was kicking so hard it was taking her breath away. Ethan ignored every word, his fingers tightening as he dragged her across the threshold. The cold outside hit her with the violence of a slap. The air she breathed felt like needles in her lungs. Her ankles trembled on the slick flagstones, and she instinctively wrapped her arms around her stomach, as if she could shield her child from the biting wind. Ethan kept walking, pulling her toward the tall steel structure in the center of the patio. It was the poolside shower, meant for hot summer evenings. Now, it stood like a metal skeleton encased in ice. She tried to dig in her heels, to pull back. He yanked harder. Amelia's voice broke as she begged him to stop. She told him she needed to sit down, that the baby was kicking too fast, that her breathing had grown too shallow. Ethan didn't stop. He reached the shower and, with a practiced motion, turned the handle. The water blasted out instantly. The pipes were internally heated, but the moment it met the frigid air, it became an icy torrent, white steam curling from its edges. The sight of it alone made Amelia's stomach clench. The sound of water hammering the stone echoed across the yard. Ethan stepped back and stared at her, his face a mask of cold that rivaled the ambient temperature. "Get under it," he commanded. "You've been disobedient all day. You need a lesson." Amelia couldn't believe what she was hearing. She whispered that she was pregnant, that she could slip, that she was already feeling faint. Her breath plumed in a white cloud before her face. Her fingers were already numb. Ethan grabbed her wrist again and shoved her forward. Her feet slid on the icy flagstones, and before she could find her balance, the freezing water slammed onto her shoulders. She screamed. The shock was electric, a current that seized her entire body. Her breath vanished. Her lungs constricted. Every inch of her skin felt like it was being pierced by 100 needles. The wool sweater was instantly soaked, clinging to her like a wet cement shroud. The weight pulled her down until she collapsed to her knees, caught in the relentless stream. The baby inside her thrashed violently, a desperate protest from her womb. She tried to hunch over to protect him, but another blast of water hit the back of her head, making her gasp. Her lips burned from the cold, then they went numb. She couldn't feel her fingers. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably. Her vision began to narrow, tunneling. She tried to crawl back, but the stones were too slick. Her palms slipped again and again. Ethan watched, arms crossed over his chest. "You're overreacting," he said. "A little cold never killed anyone." She tried to speak. The words wouldn't form. Her throat felt frozen. She weakly lifted a hand toward him, not begging, but simply trying to show him that she couldn't feel it anymore, that the shivering had turned into uncontrollable convulsions, that she wasn't playing a game, she was dying. But Ethan's expression didn't change. He was a statue carved from ice. A deep tremor shot through her abdomen. It wasn't a contraction, not exactly, but a warning that her body was crossing a dangerous threshold. Hypothermia and pregnancy were a lethal combination. Her vision blurred. She blinked. The world split in two. She tried to push herself out of the water again, but her knees slid uselessly. She managed one word through chattering teeth. "Please." Then her legs gave out. She fell onto her side, her shoulder cracking against the flagstone. Her cheek pressed against the frozen stone, her hair freezing to the ground in a wet, tangled mass. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Her heart was a chaotic drum. She felt something clench deep in her belly, something she knew was wrong. Panic clawed at her chest. Something above her clicked. The security floodlights mounted along the perimeter of the yard flared to life, casting a harsh white glare. Motion sensors. They had registered her fall as a high-risk movement. The cameras along the roofline swiveled with a quiet, mechanical whir, their lenses focusing on her still form under the shower. Small red recording lights blinked steadily, capturing every second with clinical precision. On her wrist, her smart medical bracelet vibrated. It had registered the sharp drop in her skin temperature and the erratic rhythm of her heart. It transmitted an automatic distress signal. Amelia knew none of this. She only knew that the cold was inside her now. She couldn't stop shaking. She tried to lift her head, but her body refused to obey. Ethan stepped closer. For a moment, she thought he might help her. Instead, he crouched, tilted his head, and told her to get up. His tone was one of annoyance, not concern. She tried to push up, but her arm buckled. He exhaled sharply. Disappointment, frustration, as if she were an inconvenience, not a wife, not the mother carrying his child. The water kept pouring. The cold kept biting. Amelia felt her vision closing in, the edges darkening. The world tilted. A wave of terror shot through her chest. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. She thought of her baby. She whispered another prayer, a barely audible plea to protect him, to hang on, to stay alive long enough for someone to help. But the yard was empty. The country house behind her was silent. The night was indifferent. Her last coherent thought was that she couldn't feel her own heartbeat anymore. Then everything blurred into a smear of white light, the roar of water, and the distant sound of her bracelet sending a silent scream for help into the cold air. The sound of water crashing against the stone was the first thing Amelia truly heard as consciousness began to return. It roared like a waterfall in her ears. Although her head was still inches from the metal frame, she blinked slowly, unsure of how long she had been on her knees. A cold mist rose from the stream of water and drifted across the yard like thin ghosts. She tasted metal on her tongue. Her chest was tight, as if someone had cinched a rope around her ribs. The night had grown colder, or perhaps her body had simply lost its ability to generate warmth. She would never know, because Ethan approached her again. His footsteps echoed on the flagstones in a steady rhythm, no panic, no concern, only irritation. He bent down, grabbed her by the shoulder, and hauled her to her feet. Pain shot through her shoulder, and she gasped. Her vision swam for a moment, turning the overhead lights into white streaks. The world tilted again, but Ethan didn't let her fall. He held her just long enough to reposition her, like an object he was about to discard. His fingers dug into her skin through the soaked fabric of her dress. She felt herself starting to black out. Amelia tried to speak. Her throat trembled with each attempt. She whispered that she couldn't breathe, that her heart was pounding, that she could feel something seizing in her stomach. Ethan said nothing. He simply let go of her arm with a push that sent her staggering forward. Her feet stumbled on the edge of the shower platform. Her body pitched forward uncontrollably. Her hands flew out, hoping to catch herself on something. But there was nothing to grab. She fell directly under the icy water. The impact was instant and brutal. Water exploded against her body with a force that knocked the air from her lungs. She cried out, but the sound was a choked gurgle. The moment the shock hit her, her entire body seized. The water hammered her shoulders, her back, her stomach. It felt like sheets of broken glass pouring over her skin. Her breathing shattered into short gasps that couldn't go any deeper. She fought for air. Her body refused to obey. The sweater, already soaked, became a heavy trap, clinging to her skin and pulling her down. The knitted fabric absorbed the water until it felt like a slab of ice on top of her. The dress clung to the curve of her pregnant belly, highlighting every trembling movement of the child inside. The baby kicked hard, as if reacting to the sudden shock, as if trying to escape the brutal cold. The pressure in her abdomen intensified, and a painful pulse shot through her. Amelia tried to crawl away from the water, pushing her hands against the flagstone floor, but her palms slipped instantly. The ground was slick with frigid water. Her knees slammed hard against the stone, sending a sharp pain up her legs. She clawed at the ground again, but the water pinned her down. She couldn't lift her head, couldn't stop shaking, could barely think. Ethan stood in the same spot, just out of the water's reach. His arms were crossed over his chest, his coat unbuttoned. Even through a haze of shock, she could see his face clearly. He looked bored, annoyed, as if her suffering was an inconvenience, as if the sight of his pregnant wife collapsing under a stream of freezing water was an unpleasant chore he wanted to finish quickly. Amelia called his name again. The sound came out as a broken whisper. He didn't move. She tried to roll onto her side to shield her stomach. Another wave of water hit her back, forcing her flat again. Her breath came out in a choked rasp. Her fingers tingled, and then they went numb. She could no longer feel her toes. Her jaw locked from the rapid shivering. She bit her lips so hard she tasted blood, hoping the pain would keep her conscious. Ethan finally spoke. His voice was calm, as if he were giving instructions to a disobedient child. He told her to get up, to stop being dramatic, to stop embarrassing herself. Amelia wanted to tell him that she couldn't feel her body, that her skin was burning, that her heart was beating too fast, that the cold had seeped into her bones. She wanted to tell him that her baby was in danger, but the words were trapped in her throat. Only a moan escaped. The water hammered her skull with a relentless rhythm. Each drop felt like another punch. Her breathing grew even shorter. She couldn't expand her chest fully. Panic clawed up her spine. She pressed a hand to her stomach. The muscles there tensed again. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. She needed warmth, needed oxygen, needed to lie on something that wasn't soaked in ice. But Ethan watched her with an expression of pure contempt. She saw it clearly when she briefly lifted her head. He tilted his chin slightly, the expression he always used when he wanted to make her feel worthless. His gaze flickered from her trembling hands to her quivering stomach and back to her face. There was no fear, no guilt, only annoyance. The yard lights shone cold and bright above her. The mist rising from the water swirled around her. Her breath came out in short clouds that vanished instantly. She tried to move out of the direct stream of water, but her limbs refused to cooperate. Her muscles were contracting uncontrollably. Her vision flickered between sharp and blurry. She felt herself sliding deeper and deeper into an abyss she couldn't fight alone. When her hand slipped for the third time, Ethan finally uncrossed his arms, but he didn't step forward to help. He stepped to the side, giving himself a better angle to watch. "You need to understand consequences," he said. "You've pushed this too far. You brought this on yourself." Amelia barely understood his words. Her body was shutting down. Her ears were ringing, her fingers clenching weakly. The cold had consumed her completely. A violent tremor rocked her abdomen. She cried out, but the sound was lost in the roar of the falling water. Her entire body convulsed as she tried again to shield her stomach, but her strength was gone. Her arms trembled and fell limply to her sides. She collapsed onto her side, hitting the flagstone hard. The water kept beating against her back, splashing onto her face, choking every breath she tried to take. Her eyes fluttered, the world turning dark. Her heart beat erratically. Too slow, then too fast. She stared at the sky, unable to move, unable to fight. Snowflakes began to fall from the clouds, melting instantly as they touched the stream of water above her. She weakly wondered, "Does the baby feel what I feel? Is he scared?" Her body convulsed again. A hollow sound escaped her chest. She tried to say Ethan's name one more time, not as a plea, but as a warning that something catastrophic was happening inside her. Her lips barely moved. The sound was lost. Ethan sighed, a long, deep sigh of frustration. And then, Amelia finally broke. Her body went limp under the force of the water, her arms folded beneath her, her cheek pressed against the icy stone. Her breathing grew shallow and intermittent. Her eyes glazed over. For a moment, she felt like she was floating, drifting away from the pain, from the cold. And then she felt nothing at all. The water kept pouring. Ethan kept watching. The yard kept humming with the sound of her collapse. The night grew colder, and Amelia Carter lay motionless under the freezing stream, seconds from disappearing completely into the darkness. The moment Amelia's body went completely limp, the yard seemed to change. The cold that had bitten at her skin now wrapped around her like a shroud. She lay still, curled slightly on her side, the freezing water beating relentlessly against her back and neck. Her hair fanned out on the flagstones in a dark, wet halo. The world around her pulsed with a dim light and a chilling silence, and then something unseen stirred. A quiet, mechanical hum rose above her, almost imperceptible beneath the roar of the water. The estate's security system had finally registered that something was wrong. Motion sensors, thermal readers, and biometric scanners embedded in the surveillance network began to trigger, one by one. Lights flickered along the upper walls, cameras swiveled, and lenses extended with quiet clicks. The internal machinery of the security system, installed by her father, David Thorne, came to life with clinical precision. Amelia noticed none of it. She was barely conscious. Her breathing was shallow and slow. Each inhale seemed to take her last ounce of strength. Her limbs were numb. She couldn't feel anything below her shoulders. Every drop of water hit her body like an icy hammer. Shock had seeped into her bloodstream. Her pulse was a faint flutter. And yet, the cameras watched. They watched without emotion, without mercy, because they had been designed to record every second of potential danger. And Amelia Carter, lying motionless under the freezing stream, had tripped every alert the system possessed. One camera zoomed in, adjusting its focus with a precise whir. Another identified her posture as a high-risk position. A third registered the chaotic rise and fall of her chest. The bracelet on her wrist vibrated again. Its internal sensors had logged her plummeting temperature and unstable pulse. A silent, digital report was uploaded to the home's security hub. The yard lights suddenly flared brighter, casting a harsh glare on her trembling form. The cold glow exposed the bluish tint of her fingertips. It showed how her sweater was plastered like icy armor to her shivering chest. It showed how her pregnant stomach tensed and released in small spasms, a sign that her baby was reacting to the extreme conditions. Ethan flinched at the sudden light. He turned toward one of the cameras, annoyed by the intrusion. He raised a hand as if to wave it away, as if the surveillance system were a pesky servant who had intervened at the wrong moment. The small red light of the recording dot reflected in his eyes. He frowned and stepped to the side to avoid the direct beam. He had no idea that the machine above him was about to become the witness that would destroy him. Amelia's breathing hitched again. A wet, coughing sound escaped her chest. Her entire body gave one violent shudder before going still. That movement triggered a new series of alerts. A sensor near the entrance recognized the signs of physical distress. Another identified the temperature of the water falling on her body. An internal display registered it as dangerously cold for a pregnant woman. The system flagged the situation as a medical emergency. And yet, the only person present did nothing. Ethan crossed his arms again and looked down at her with the same contempt he'd shown from the beginning. He muttered something under his breath, annoyed that she was still lying there. He told her to stop being dramatic. He told her to get up before she embarrassed herself even more. His words were lost in the roar of the water. Amelia didn't hear him. She heard nothing now but a low hum inside her skull. Her fingers twitched weakly. A last, instinctive attempt to move. She felt the cold clench around her heart. Her breathing paused on a shallow inhale, then another, and then a pause so long it seemed her lungs had forgotten their purpose. Her eyelids fluttered open briefly. She saw the yard lights as blurry halos. She saw her own breath floating in small clouds. She didn't see Ethan, didn't see the world. She was slipping into unconsciousness again. For the first time, the bracelet on her wrist flashed red, not yellow, not orange, but red. It signified a critical emergency. Danger to the mother, danger to the child. It transmitted the information faster than any human voice could. It sent a distress signal to the house's central system, and the house responded instantly. A loud, piercing alarm echoed across the yard, then another and another. The cameras swiveled again. The lights flashed twice. The system had activated a top priority alert. The estate had been custom-built with medical monitoring systems because David Thorne, the multi-billionaire patriarch, protected his daughter with the same intensity he used to protect his empire. It was the last gift he had given her before her wedding, a gift he never imagined her survival would depend on. Ethan froze. The alarm was irritating. He looked at Amelia, as if she were the cause of every inconvenience in his life. He walked over to her, kneeling just close enough to see her face. Her lips were blue, her eyelids half open, her skin pale and waxy, her breathing so shallow it was almost non-existent. For the first time, Ethan's expression changed. Not fear, not guilt, not regret, only annoyance that her body had grown too weak to obey him. He reached out and shook her shoulder, not gently, but with the rough impatience of someone waking a person from a deep sleep. Her head lolled limply to the side. She didn't respond. He swore under his breath. Another alarm sounded. This one was deeper, louder, a continuous tone that echoed across the yard like a death knell. The security hub in the house had switched to emergency mode and was now transmitting a medical alert to the primary account holder. Far from the yard, on the wrist of a man sitting in his office in a downtown high-rise, a notification vibrated. Then another, then a third. The bracelet on Amelia's arm had reached its critical threshold. The cameras had flagged her motionless body as a potential casualty. The system had detected her body temperature dropping at a dangerous rate. It sent the information with time-stamped video files. The system determined that Amelia Carter was in mortal danger. Back in the yard, the water still poured. Amelia's body was motionless, her chest rising just enough to keep her alive. The child inside her stirred weakly, reacting to the stress as best it could. The air felt colder, sharper, heavier, as if winter itself had leaned down to watch the final moments. The cameras recorded everything. They recorded Ethan standing over her. They recorded her body convulsing before going still. They recorded the water suppressing her breath. They recorded the signs of hypothermia. They recorded the moment her bracelet flashed a furious red. They recorded the truth that was about to bring an army to this yard, and the truth that Ethan Michael had no idea that cameras never blink. The alarm blaring through the yard did not stop. It pulsed like a metallic heartbeat, sharp and insistent. Each blast cut through the night air with chilling authority. Ethan winced at the noise, glaring at the flashing red light on Amelia's medical bracelet. He muttered something under his breath, annoyed that even unconscious, she was causing problems for him. He had no idea that the same signal irritating him was already traveling far beyond the estate walls. Miles away, in a high-security office with biometric locks and bulletproof glass, a phone vibrated on a polished black desk. The vibration was not subtle. It shook hard, shifting slightly before the screen lit up. A single message was displayed on the device, highlighted in flashing red. Critical threat level detected for mother. Vitals unstable. Body temperature dangerously low. Location: estate yard. David Thorne, the multi-billionaire industrial titan and father of the woman currently dying under a stream of icy water, stared at the screen. The color drained from his face. He didn't hesitate. His chair screeched against the floor as he shot to his feet. His hand slammed against a panel beside his desk. A sequence of lights rippled across the room. A red banner appeared on the large central monitor. Emergency protocol activated. Authorization required for immediate response. He typed in his authorization code, his hands shaking once before they became as steady as rock. The system responded instantly. 6 screens blinked to life, each showing a live feed from the estate's cameras. And on the main screen, under the harsh white glare of the floodlights, David saw his daughter lying motionless on the ground. The freezing water beat down on her back without mercy. Her body was still. Her fingers were curled. Her skin had a terrifying blue tint. For one horrifying second, David couldn't breathe. Then, a fire ignited inside him. He roared a single word: "Go!" Across the city, engines roared to life. Black, armored SUVs, identical and built like armored beasts, peeled out of a private garage marked with the emblem of David Thorne's security service. Their tires screamed on the asphalt. Their headlights cut through the night like white blades. Inside each vehicle sat men trained not for war, but for protection. Their faces were impassive, their movements synchronized, their mission singular and absolute: protect David Thorne's daughter at all costs. Back in the yard, Ethan finally moved away from Amelia. Not out of concern, but out of frustration. He brushed water from his sleeve and muttered that she always had to make things more dramatic than necessary. He looked toward the house, debating whether he should drag her inside, now that the alarm had become so persistent. He still believed he was in control. He still believed the night was his. He didn't know that the home's security hub had already sent the video stream to multiple off-site servers. He didn't know that the medical alert had been transmitted to an emergency response team hired specifically for the duration of Amelia's pregnancy. He didn't know that the cameras had identified him as the aggressor. They had recorded, time-stamped, and filed the footage as legal evidence. He didn't know that 6 heavily armored SUVs were speeding toward his home at a frantic pace. Amelia remained motionless. Water was now pooling beneath her, reflecting her faint breaths in small ripples. Her chest rose and fell with an unnatural slowness. Frost began to form on the tips of her hair. Her bracelet vibrated again. The red light flashed faster. Her body temperature continued to drop. Her baby stirred weakly in her womb, as if trying to fight against the cold. The house lights flashed one more time. A loud chime echoed through the air, different from the alarm. It came from deep within the house. The system had escalated the alert level. It had activated its highest tier of response. Emergency directive. Ethan spun around at the sound. His face tightened. He swore again, louder this time. Something about the system's response was unnerving him. He paced in a slow circle, trying to regain control of the situation, but control had slipped away from him long before the first alarm sounded. Far beyond the yard, the convoy of SUVs tore down the highway. Snow kicked up behind them in white clouds. The drivers communicated in short, clipped phrases. Vitals are unstable, temperature dropping rapidly, ETA 5 minutes. The team leader, a broad-shouldered man with eyes as sharp as blades, studied the live feed on his dashboard. When he saw Amelia lying motionless under the water, his jaw clenched with contained fury. They accelerated. Inside the house, internal alarms were triggered. The doors automatically unlocked for emergency entry. The heating systems in certain sectors shut down to redirect power to the floodlights in the yard. The security system was now in full medical rescue mode. Every decision the house now made was centered on saving Amelia's life. Ethan heard the distant hum of approaching vehicles, the sound of tires on gravel, the roar of engines growing with every second. He snapped his head toward the entrance of the property. Unease flickered across his face. For the first time that night, he felt something that made his own pulse jump. It wasn't guilt, not fear for Amelia. It was the fear of being caught. He took a step back from her body, then another. The water continued to beat down on her, but he was no longer looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the distant sound. He peered into the night, trying to see what was coming for him. He didn't have to wait long. The first SUV burst through the front gates with explosive force. The heavy iron gates slammed against the stone pillars, sending sparks flying across the driveway. The second SUV followed, then the third, each more aggressive than the last. Their headlights sliced through the yard like beams of judgment. The engines roared like beasts unleashed. Ethan stumbled back, stunned by the sudden violence of their arrival. His hands rose instinctively, unsure whether to defend himself or surrender. His heart hammered against his ribs. He took another step back, nearly slipping on the wet stone. The SUVs screeched to a halt in perfect formation. The doors flew open simultaneously. 6 men in black tactical gear poured out, moving with lethal efficiency. Their boots hit the ground in quick, synchronized steps. Their eyes scanned the yard with a brutal focus. The emblem of David Thorne's security service gleamed on their chests. Ethan finally understood they weren't here for him. They were here for her. The leader raised a fist, signaling the team to spread out. He barked orders with sharp precision. "Medical team forward! Thermal blankets on standby! Secure the water source! Move!" 3 men rushed toward Amelia. 2 others moved to stand between Ethan and her. One stared at Ethan and spoke in a calm, icy tone that made Ethan's stomach clench. "Do not move." The yard had changed. The night had changed. Control now belonged solely to them. And the moment the first security officer reached Amelia's still body, the battle for her life began. The yard thrummed with the power of the idling SUVs. Their engines rumbled like predators claiming territory. A wave of movement shattered the icy stillness that had been suffocating Amelia just minutes before. The security personnel moved fast. Their sharp, decisive steps cut through the frigid air, their black tactical uniforms a stark contrast against the pale stone. Every motion was precise, every breath visible in the winter air. There was a purpose in their stride, a purpose dictated by the orders of a father who had watched his daughter collapse on a monitor screen. Ethan froze as the officers approached. His mind scrambled for an explanation, an excuse, anything that could make this moment less catastrophic. But his mouth opened and closed without a sound. The words wouldn't form. The team's presence made it impossible to pretend he was still in control. Their eyes swept over him with a cold neutrality, as if assessing a threat that was no longer theoretical. 2 officers positioned themselves between Ethan and Amelia. One held out a hand slightly, a barrier that needed no explanation. "Do not approach, do not interfere." The message was clear, without a word. The other officers reached Amelia. They dropped to their knees beside her trembling form as the water continued to pour over her. The lead officer, a solid man with steady hands, pressed 2 fingers to her neck. His jaw immediately tightened. He called for a thermal blanket, a pulse oximeter, immediate extraction. There was no panic in his voice, only urgency, the kind born from training and the knowledge that seconds mattered. The water beating down on Amelia's back created a mist that shrouded her like a funeral veil. One officer moved behind the shower valve and wrenched it shut. The roar of the water ceased. The yard fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the whispering wind. Amelia's body seemed to deflate without the pressure of the water holding it tense. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with a faint blue tint to her lips and fingertips. Her stomach rose weakly beneath her wet dress, each tiny movement a testament that she was still fighting. The officer closest to her gently rolled her onto her back, her head lolled to the side. Her eyes were half open, glazed, and unfocused. He pressed a hand to her cheek and flinched slightly at the icy temperature. He called her name, Mrs. Carter. "Amelia, can you hear me?" She didn't respond. Her breathing was shallow and erratic. Another officer lifted her wrist to read the data from the medical bracelet. The red indicator was flashing rapidly. The screen displayed her plummeting temperature and unstable heart rate. The data alone was alarming. Combined with her physical state, it painted a picture of a woman on the brink. The team wasted no time. They covered her torso with a reflective thermal blanket, tucking it under her shoulders and stomach to trap as much heat as possible. They placed heat packs along her sides. Their movements were synchronized, fluid, the choreography of professionals who had rehearsed these life-saving motions countless times. One monitored her breathing, another checked her pulse, and a third prepared to lift her for transport. Ethan watched it all, his face tightening with every passing second, his hands clenched into fists. He took a half-step forward. One of the officers snapped his head in his direction and said with chilling clarity, "Do not come any closer." Ethan's mouth opened in protest. He managed to force out a few words. "She's exaggerating. It was just cold water. She needed to calm down." The officer stared at him as if he were speaking a language no person with a conscience could understand. His voice dropped to a controlled, dangerous calm. "Sir, what you did could have killed her." Those words hit Ethan harder than any physical blow. He stumbled back again, his legs feeling weak. He looked at Amelia, wrapped in the thermal blanket and unconscious on the flagstones. For the first time that night, something resembling fear flickered across his face. Not fear for her, but fear for himself. The officers began to lift Amelia. They handled her with a gentleness that stood in stark contrast to the brutality she had endured moments before. Her head swayed slightly as they raised her. Her lips parted, letting out a faint, whistling inhale. Her fingers twitched, as if reaching for something only she could see. One officer leaned close and whispered encouragement. "Mrs. Carter, hang on, you're safe now." Another placed a firm hand on her stomach, feeling for signs of fetal distress. He felt a faint movement beneath his palm, and relief flashed in his eyes for the briefest of moments. They carried her to a stretcher they had brought from one of the SUVs. Straps were clipped into place. A portable heater was positioned near her feet. Her vitals were being read continuously. Her pulse remained faint, her breathing shallow. Time was running out. As they prepared to carry her to the waiting vehicle, the team leader turned to look directly at Ethan. The yard lights cast harsh shadows on his grim features. He spoke with the authority of a man who had just witnessed an unforgivable act. "You will step aside now." Ethan hesitated, his jaw tight, but he moved. The officers swept past him, carrying the woman he had sworn to protect, the woman he had nearly killed. The wind stirred the edges of the thermal blanket. A low moan escaped Amelia's lips, so quiet it could have been the wind. The officers hurried toward the SUV. The back doors opened. The heater whirred louder. Amelia's stretcher was slid into the vehicle with practiced efficiency. The convoy was moments from leaving, but before the doors closed, the team leader turned back one last time. His voice was cold and final. "Her father is on his way." A chill colder than the winter night shot through Ethan's body. Justice had arrived, and retribution was coming. The yard, once his domain, no longer belonged to Ethan Carter. The moment Amelia's stretcher disappeared into the back of the SUV, the atmosphere shifted. The cold itself seemed to sharpen, cutting away the last vestiges of the control he thought he had. All that remained was a man standing alone on wet flagstones, surrounded by trained professionals who had just witnessed the aftermath of his cruelty. The team leader stepped forward, his eyes icy and unreadable. Each of the other officers stood frozen, watching him, awaiting the next command. Ethan felt the weight of their attention pressing down on him like a physical burden. He tried to straighten his shoulders, to project an air of calm, but his throat was tight, his pulse hammered in his neck. His breathing grew shallow. The leader spoke in a low, measured voice. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay exactly where you are. Do not interfere, and do not leave the property. Do you understand?" Ethan bristled at the command. This was his home, his land. No one spoke to him like that. He opened his mouth, ready to assert some illusion of authority, but nothing coherent came out. The officer's gaze crushed the words before they could leave his tongue. Behind the leader, one of the officers was downloading the data from Amelia's medical bracelet onto a secured tablet. The screen filled with time-stamped logs, her plummeting temperature, her collapsing heart rate, her chaotic oxygen levels. Another officer was uploading the yard's video footage to an encrypted drive. The high-definition video played back in silence. Ethan's face appeared with brutal clarity, his hand pushing her, her body falling, the water pouring down, his refusal to help. Every second was an indictment. The officers exchanged glances. Ethan saw the shift in their expressions: disbelief, disgust, professional resolve. None of them looked surprised. The scene playing out in the yard was something they were trained to prevent. Tonight, they were collecting the evidence of it. Ethan felt a flush of heat rise in his chest. His voice broke into a forced shout. "This is all an overreaction. She was fine. She just gets too emotional. She always does this." The team leader stepped closer. The temperature seemed to drop another degree. "Sir, she was minutes from respiratory arrest. She is in hypothermic shock. Your negligence could have killed her and her child." Ethan tried to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. He waved a wild hand toward the now silent shower. "It was just cold water. People take ice baths all the time. It's not a crime. The officer's jaw tightened. Her clothes were soaked. The air is below freezing. She couldn't breathe. She was unconscious. You did nothing. Those aren't opinions, sir. Those are facts. Ethan's hands began to shake. He clenched them into fists, forcing his voice louder. You don't understand our marriage. You don't understand the things she does to provoke me. She pushes me. She knows how to manipulate. The officer raised an eyebrow. Manipulate. The word hung in the air like a curse. Another officer approached, holding a small thermal imaging device. He showed the reading to the leader. Her skin temperature was 88 degrees Fahrenheit. If we'd been 5 minutes later, her heart could have stopped. Ethan's face went pale. His breath hitched. For the first time, he felt the blade of reality cut through his denial. His gaze shot to the SUV where Amelia was fighting for her life. He swallowed hard, suddenly unable to speak. The team leader took another step. Ethan instinctively moved back. The officer's voice dropped to a tone that made the yard even colder. Sir, you need to understand something very clearly. This is no longer a private matter. It's a criminal one. And everything that happened here tonight is on record. The recording has already been transmitted to secure servers. Nothing can be erased. Ethan stumbled over his next breath. He tried to form a response, but a new sound split the air, the roar of another engine. The SUV carrying Amelia pulled away first, accelerating toward the exit to get to the medical center. The headlights swept across the yard. In their glow, Ethan caught a glimpse of her form wrapped in the blanket, her eyelids still closed, her chest rising faintly, a paramedic pressing a heat pack to her side. The sight stirred something in him, but whether it was guilt or fear, he couldn't tell. The rest of the convoy remained in place. The officers didn't relax, didn't soften. They formed a living wall around the yard. Then came the sound that froze Ethan completely. A second set of engines, deeper, heavier. A vehicle unlike the others pulled around the corner. It was black, armored, larger. Its headlights sliced through the yard like blades of white fire. Everyone turned toward it. Ethan's heartbeat stalled because he knew exactly who was inside. Her father. And the night, already turned against him, was about to deliver its final blow. The armored vehicle came to a stop with a deep, vibrating rumble that made the flagstones beneath Ethan's feet tremble. Its headlights remained focused on him. A blinding white glare that felt like an accusation. Ethan shielded his eyes. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet remained rooted to the spot, heavy and useless. The back door of the vehicle opened slowly, not rushed, not frantic, but slow, controlled, commanding. A figure emerged, broad-shouldered in a dark overcoat, his posture unyielding. David Thorne didn't look at the officers first. He looked directly at Ethan. That one look carried the weight of a death sentence. His eyes were sharp, burning with a cold fury that no voice could convey. Ethan's breath caught. He felt his stomach twist, as if gravity itself had turned against him. David Thorne's presence filled the yard like an approaching storm. His footsteps were measured, each impact against the stone a sharp report. The officers fell into formation around him, their deference a clear signal of his authority. Fear coiled in Ethan's gut. David spoke, his voice low but carrying. "Where is my daughter?" The team leader pointed to the departing SUV. "She's been stabilized and is en route. Her condition is critical, sir." A flash of pain crossed David's eyes, quickly replaced by something colder, more focused, more lethal. He turned back to Ethan, who was trying desperately to stand straight, to look composed, but his trembling hands gave him away. David advanced until only a few feet separated them. The yard lights carved harsh lines on his face. He looked at Ethan the way a man might look at something that had already crossed the line of forgiveness. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and hard. "Tell me exactly what you did to her." Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing coherent came out. His throat had closed, his thoughts racing. He raised his hands, gesturing vaguely toward the shower. It was cold water. "She was being dramatic. She provoked me. You don't know her." The officers around him tensed with visible disgust. David's expression didn't change. He simply turned his head to the team leader. "Show me." The leader held up the tablet, the recording already cued. The high-definition image filled the screen. Ethan forcing Amelia under the icy water. Amelia collapsing, her body convulsing, her breathing stopping. Ethan watching her with his arms crossed. David watched in silence. His face remained still, but the air around him had changed. This was a man who had built an empire on calculated, lethal decisions, now watching the near-total destruction of his daughter through the eyes of someone who had reached the point of no return. When it was over, he handed the tablet back, his hand shaking once, just once. Then his voice came out in a tone so quiet it chilled even the officers. "Arrest him." Ethan's entire body went rigid. "What? No, wait, you can't. I'm her husband." The team leader stepped forward, his face devoid of emotion. "Sir, you are being detained on suspicion of assault on a pregnant woman, criminal negligence, and potential fetal endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." Ethan staggered back, his voice cracking. "This is insane. I didn't do anything wrong. She drove me to it. She's always exaggerating. She's manipulating all of you." Two officers seized his arms. His knees buckled, his feet dragging on the wet flagstones. He gave a weak struggle. "Let go of me. I didn't hurt her. It was cold water." "Cold water isn't a crime." One officer tightened his grip. "Cold water doesn't make a woman collapse. Cold water doesn't stop her from breathing. Cold water doesn't send her body into shock." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the yard. Ethan flinched, panic shooting through his chest. His wrists burned from the pressure. His mind scrambled for an excuse, a lie, anything to reverse this nightmare. David stepped closer, his shadow falling over Ethan like a final judgment. He spoke with a calm intensity that shook Ethan to his core. "You almost killed my daughter and my grandchild. The law will deal with you now." Ethan shook his head wildly. "I'm innocent. You're all overreacting. She'll tell you. She'll explain." David's eyes narrowed. "She can't speak. She's fighting for her life." Those words hit Ethan harder than the cold ever had. For the first time, a deep, suffocating dread swelled in his chest. The officers dragged him toward a waiting patrol car at the edge of the yard. Blue and red lights began to flash, reflecting off the flagstones and casting violent streaks across Ethan's pale face. The cold night air carried the sound of his ragged breaths as he tried to pull away. Behind them, David stood perfectly still, watching with an expression carved from stone and grief. The team leader approached him silently. "We will update you on her condition as soon as we have news from the medical center." David nodded once, his eyes never leaving the driveway, where Ethan was being forced into the back of the patrol car. The door slammed shut, the locks clicked, and for the first time that night, Ethan Carter understood. This was just the beginning of what he was about to face. His punishment had only just begun. Ethan had always believed his power protected him. The money, the connections, the influence, they were shields he thought nothing could penetrate. But as the patrol car drove him through the iron gates of his own estate, he felt those shields crack, crumble, and collapse, one by one. He had no idea how quickly they were already turning to dust. The very moment the gates closed behind him, an emergency alert appeared on dozens of screens in corporate offices across the city. The notification chimed throughout Orion Enterprises. Emergency shareholder alert. CEO implicated in domestic violence incident. Video evidence transferred to authorities. Executives who were about to go to bed suddenly found themselves frozen in front of glowing monitors. Phones vibrated on desks, laptops lit up with unread messages. The board members stared at the initial report, their disbelief quickly turning to panic. They played the video footage sent by the security system. Ethan pushing Amelia, the water pouring over her, her body collapsing, his cold, indifferent expression. Within seconds, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. Voices clashed, angry, confused, terrified. One insisted they needed to distance themselves immediately. Another demanded that Ethan be suspended from all public duties. A third warned that federal regulators would be involved by morning. The company's legal department was already drafting a disclosure statement. Every second now mattered. Then came the markets. Before midnight, Orion's stock began to plummet. Investors didn't wait for the details. The video circulating online was enough. Rumors spread like wildfire. Domestic abuse, attempted harm to a pregnant woman, negligence, assault. The words that destroyed reputations in hours, not days. The financial blowback was immediate and brutal. The stock dropped 17% in an hour, then 19%, then 22%. Ethan knew none of this yet. He sat in the back of the patrol car, hands cuffed behind him, his head throbbing, his breathing shallow. But across the city, phones were ringing off the hook. Journalists pounced on the story. Newsrooms scrambled for statements. Orion Enterprises was being buried under an avalanche of headlines. CEO arrested in late-night incident. Pregnant wife hospitalized. Video evidence suggests assault. By the time the patrol car arrived at the police station, the outside world had already turned on him. Back in the corporate tower, a familiar name appeared in the call log. Their largest investor, the one who controlled nearly 15% of the company. His message was short, cold, and final. He was pulling out, effective immediately. That decision triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. 2 major partners terminated their ongoing contracts. A bank froze the line of credit being used for expansion. A tech company halted a joint venture. The emails flooded in, each one severing a tie to Ethan Carter. In a holding cell, Ethan felt a rising sense of dread. The silence of the concrete walls was suffocating. He stared at the floor, replaying David Thorne's voice in his head. "You almost killed my daughter and my grandchild." The words had landed deeper than he expected, but he pushed the thought away. His ego scrambled to survive. None of this is real. They're exaggerating. The company will fix this. The board will protect me. He didn't know the board was already drafting his termination notice. A few minutes later, a police officer walked to the bars and handed him a single sheet of paper, a notification from corporate counsel. Effective immediately, Ethan Carter was suspended from his position as CEO pending an investigation. He read it twice, the words blurred, his breath quickened, his fingers trembling. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. Outside the cell, the officer watched without sympathy, a man who had seen too many husbands claim innocence after leaving their wives broken. Then came another blow. The officer returned with a second update, this one from the bank that managed Ethan's personal accounts. Due to the ongoing investigation, several assets were being temporarily frozen. Certain accounts were locked, luxury payments were flagged, and his credit privileges were suspended. Ethan felt something close to suffocation. His wealth was his identity, his power, his influence. Without it, he was naked. Meanwhile, the video footage from the yard continued to spread online. Millions of viewers had now seen the moment he forced Amelia into the freezing water, the moment she collapsed, the moment he stood there with his arms crossed, unmoved. Outrage erupted. Comments exploded under every post. High-profile activists demanded charges. Women's groups called for the maximum penalty. Strangers from around the world demanded justice. By dawn, the incident had become a national scandal. Hashtags were trending. News anchors were analyzing every frame of the video. Orion's stock had fallen even further. Employees were expressing their disgust. A petition demanding his permanent removal was circulating. Shareholders were demanding damages. His empire was crumbling faster than he could comprehend. In the quiet of his cell, Ethan finally understood something he had never considered possible. Money could buy silence. Money could buy influence. Money could bury rumors. But money could not bury the truth when it was caught on camera. The truth was out in the world. The world had judged him, and nothing would ever bring back the life he had just destroyed with his own hands. The hospital room was quiet, except for the rhythmic hum of machinery and the faint beep of a heart monitor. Dim morning light filtered through the blinds, casting thin lines across the floor. The air was warm, sterile, safe, a stark contrast to the icy yard where Amelia's life had nearly ended just hours ago. She lay in the hospital bed, tucked under thick blankets. Her skin, once an icy blue, had regained a fragile warmth. Her breathing was now steady, shallow, but stronger. A warmer beside her hummed quietly, coaxing the heat back into her body, piece by piece. For a long time, she didn't move. Her mind drifted somewhere between sleep and memory, the water, the cold, the darkness, the pain, then nothing. Slowly, her eyelashes fluttered. Her first breath was a sharp, startled thing, as if her lungs were waking from a long winter. Her eyes opened, the ceiling above her coming into focus. She blinked again, her fingers twitched. She raised a trembling hand to her chest, feeling the rise and fall, feeling life again. And then she felt it. A faint push beneath her ribs. Her baby. Tears instantly filled her eyes. Her hand slid down to her stomach, cupping the small mound beneath the hospital blanket. The fear she had carried in those last moments in the yard exploded in her chest. But the movement under her palm was strong, real, alive. Her baby had survived. She let out a sob that was half relief, half grief. A shadow moved at the door. Heavy footsteps approached. She turned her head, a slow, aching movement, and saw him. David Thorne entered the room. His shoulders were slumped with exhaustion, his eyes red from sleepless hours. But the moment he saw her awake, something inside him broke. His breath hitched. His impenetrable expression fractured, and for the first time since the alert came, he allowed himself to feel. He crossed to her bed in 3 quick strides. Amelia reached for him with a trembling hand. He took it in both of his, lowering his forehead to her fingers as a choked sound escaped him. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "You scared me. You scared us all." Amelia swallowed hard, tears tracking down her cheeks and onto the pillow. She whispered the question, "The baby? Is he okay?" David lifted his head, nodding even as his voice shook. "His heartbeat is strong. They're monitoring him, but he's a fighter, just like you." Amelia closed her eyes in gratitude, her body sinking into the mattress with a quiet relief. For a few moments, they stayed like that, father and daughter, 2 souls bound by terror and love. David held her hand as if he were afraid she would disappear again. She squeezed his fingers weakly, letting him know she was still there. A soft knock broke the silence. A female doctor entered, her face calm and reassuring. She checked Amelia's vitals, glanced at the monitor, and nodded with professional confidence. "Your condition is stable. You were very close to hypothermic collapse, but the rapid response saved both you and your baby. You'll need rest, warmth, and monitoring, but you're going to recover." Amelia sobbed quietly again. The doctor placed a gentle hand on her shoulder before leaving them alone. David sat down by the bed. His expression had changed. The grief was gone, replaced by steel. Resolve, a fury held in check only by discipline. Amelia saw it. She knew what it meant. She whispered, her voice raw, "He's in jail." "Yes," David nodded once. He looked her in the eye. "And that's where he'll stay. The officers recorded everything. The video footage is irrefutable. The medical reports confirm the harm he caused. His company is collapsing. His power is gone. And now, there's one more step, the one only you can take." He reached into his overcoat and pulled out a document. He placed it carefully on the tray table by her bed. A pen lay on top. Amelia stared at the paper. Permanent restraining order, immediate, irrevocable. And beneath it, a second document, the charges. Assault, endangerment, attempted fetal harm. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen. Her entire life had been shaped by fear. Fear of his temper, fear of his threats, fear of waking up another day in a house that felt like a prison. Not anymore. She pressed the pen to the paper. The signature was shaky, but it was hers. A mark of finality, of freedom. David exhaled a ragged breath, pride filling his eyes. He kissed the back of her hand. As Amelia leaned back against the pillows, she felt a weight lift from her chest. For the first time in months, she was breathing without fear. She closed her eyes and let the warmth envelop her, not just the warmth of the hospital bed, but the warmth of survival, the warmth of a future she had almost lost, a future she was now claiming for herself. Outside the room, the world churned with headlines and outrage, with lawsuits and investigations, with criminal charges and corporate collapse. Ethan Carter's empire was crumbling, brick by brick, crushed by a truth he couldn't outrun. But in the quiet hospital room, Amelia's story was no longer about him. It was the story of a woman who had survived, a child who had endured, and a new life that was waiting to begin. Justice had been served, and Amelia Carter was finally free.